preparing. Looks like we have some attendees. We'll be starting in just a moment. All right, Steve, you're good to go. So live stream's up. You can present your screen and you can go ahead.
Okay.
It should continue when I hop off.
All right. Is that sharing? Okay, great. Thanks everyone for joining. Good afternoon. I'm Steve Fuller, co-founder and CEO of Blumira. And thank you very much for joining. Hopefully we'll have fun talking today. Patrick Garrity, our VP of Operations, was scheduled to host this webinar, and I am playing the role of substitute teacher today. So hopefully we can have fun. Feel free to ask questions through the Q&A portion of the Zoom meeting. I'll do my best to make sure that I'm picking those up on the fly, and then at the last 5 minutes, we'll have a sort of a regular Q&A session in case I don't notice you as I'm going through the prezo and the demo. So what we're going to start with is a little bit of an overview on automating threat detection and response, and then I will go through a Blumira product demo. So here we go. And in terms of what we're going to cover today, the overview of how security information event management products work for threat detection today. A lot of what we had in mind when we built Blumira was making security better compared to how a lot of the sort of status quo products work in the market. We'll talk more about that. We'll talk about how Blumira can help you in your environment, go through a couple of different examples of threat detections, showing you playbook examples, as well as some automated responsive actions through your integrations with next-gen firewalls, how to set up an integration or a data source within Blumira. So, how things work today. There's a lot of pieces and parts that you have to get right in order to get visibility and within your environment. It sort of starts with getting log data or data from APIs from your existing infrastructure, getting into something like a SIM that can deal with that information. If you're running an on-premise SIM, there's a whole your rules for detection, tune them on an ongoing basis, keep up with the threat landscapes that will do things similar to with providing playbooks. What do I do when I see this alert pop up? And then making sure all that happens where you are able to see the good stuff or the bad stuff, I should say, right? The important stuff. When something is really important, it's critical that the organization be able to see it and respond to it. without creating sort of a cacophony of noise that is just going to sort of drain your time for things that are irrelevant, erroneous, and not useful. So sort of threading that needle is a tricky part. What happens if you, or why do you need to get this right? And kind of what are some of the struggles? First of all, we're seeing a change over the last couple of years. A lot of the SIM products and the threat detection capabilities were originally designed and built for large organizations who were often the subject of cyber attacks and had a strong need to get security right or to be able to respond effectively when being attacked. What's changed over the last couple of years is attackers who are motivated by money have moved down market. And what that means for those of you who are, not part of the Fortune 100 who have been sort of targeted all along is now my mid-market business, whether it's a retailer, a manufacturer, a tech company, a law office, what have you, becomes a target because there's a profit model that works now with things like ransomware, CEO fraud, and so forth. Those attacks are the same level of sophistication that were previously targeted at just the Fortune 100, but now you have to deal with it too. And on top of that, to make your life more difficult is you probably don't have the staff or the resources that large organizations have. And as a matter of fact, by far most organizations feel like they don't have enough security expertise on staff. And all of this basically leads to the situation that if I can't get visibility and understanding of what's happening in real time in my environment or close to real time, you're at greater risk for compromise and either loss of availability, loss of data, or disruption in the business. So kind of back to the task at hand, there's a lot that has to go into creating visibility to the point where I can instrument my environment to the time when I have an initial detection to the place where it's prioritized, investigated, and ready to respond to. The pieces that are typically put together in an organization are a SIM product. A lot of the older products are on premise, which, as I said, creates challenges in and of themselves in terms of managing as opposed to a cloud-based SIM like Blumira. You may add tools that assist with some of the post detection processing to help you prioritize, triage, and figure out what to do or to sort of build repeatable playbooks. But usually the centerpiece of making all this stuff work is a bunch of people. And they typically have to be security analysts, which are certainly scarce in the marketplace. If your organization has them, you probably need to have them focused on important things, not just sort of tracking down false positives. And what this operations center often looks like is, people like Gartner will say that, security operations center to run 24/7, you probably need 8 to 12 people, which is realistic if you're a Fortune 100 company and you've got a $20 million plus security budget and you spend a couple $1,000,000 a year on a security operations center, that may be fine. But most of the organizations that are, in the mid-market and in the smaller enterprises can't afford to build a security operations center. They want to dedicate less than one person to this activity. If they have security people, they're often wearing multiple hats. And that model with the room full of people is just inefficient and too expensive and out of reach for most. So basically this sort of house of cards comes tumbling down if you don't have the people to manage all this. And one of the analogies we use here is building and operating your own sim is often like sort of the old-fashioned choose your own adventure stories. They sound fun and challenging and exciting. You get to explore threats. You get to learn about tactics, techniques, and practices that adversaries are taking. There's great, interesting stuff with the security practice that you learn from a security practitioner standpoint. All that stuff is great. However, most of these choose your own adventure stories end badly. You end up taking a path that has a less than favorable outcome. And that's the reality with most organizations is they can't get without an outsized resource dedication of resources, you can't even get the basic stuff done. You can't get all the log data in, parsed and normalized, and to the point where your rules are set up to the point where you can actually see what matters and not drowned in information. So, and most research points to that disconnect landing back at what we talked about at the beginning, which is there's this security expertise shortage and the fact that that those security resources within most organizations are already stretched too thin and just don't have the time to dedicate to getting this great sounding story working correctly. So how this should work, first of all, we have to go end to end, right? It's not good enough just to have things showing up on a dashboard with nobody looking, or things stored in a log database that no one's paying attention to. But it starts with that, right? So we need to fully automate the detection process, which includes all the ingestion, all of the parsing, which is essentially normalizing and getting semi-unstructured data into a structured format, comparing it to threat intel, building and maintaining threat rules, using things like honeypots that are real simple, effective tools for detecting lateral movement, notifying the right people, understanding what's most important and what needs further investigation, and then knowing what to do when something happens. So we need to go past that to the time that threats are detected. They need to be validated. If any investigation is needed, it needs to be simple and clear in terms of what to do. I'm going to show you an example of that. And then most importantly, we need to know what to do. Ideally, we take an automated action to actually go ahead on your behalf and make take a step that will contain or block a threat. But that's not always realistic. Sometimes we just need instructions that can be handed off to the IT organization to take the correct steps. And we'll show some examples of that. Blumira does all that. The way we do it is using a cloud-based service. It's a simple setup. I'll go into a little bit more on the architecture and the Q&A if anyone has detailed questions, but everything, all the important parts of Blumira are in the cloud. All the storage, processing, and so forth is in the cloud. Uptime managed by us, capacity planning managed by us. What's needed in your environment is a small sensor that basically acts as the collector of either syslog data that from things like on-premise devices. The sensor will also use API connections for data services that are cloud-based in themselves, things like Office 365 or CrowdStrike or Carbon Black Defense, things like that. The sensor basically just communicates outbound on port 443 HTTPS, sends all the data to the cloud. You get all the results through the portal and notifications of when something's important to act on, as well as being able to see reports from a managerial level dealing with compliance. We integrate with your stack. The most important data sources we find in most organizations are things like your next-gen firewalls, your endpoint protection products, your source of identity, things like Active Directory, your other important tools that are in use, usually things like email, other security products, and then of course operating systems and on down the line. And then we're also, in addition to meeting the security use case of threat detection, this is also great to check off some compliance needs, whether it's PCI, DSS, things like incident response capabilities, things like log management and review capabilities, as well as sort of the alphabet soup of compliance standards with NIST, FFIEC, HIPAA, and the whole lot. So now that all that, we've kind of got the groundwork set, I'm going to move over to a demo, and we can see Blumira in action here. So where I'm landing here is a couple different roles within Blumira. We've got a manager role. So for those of you who are sort of in an oversight role, you might want to see things like at a high level, how much data is coming in, what sorts of threats have been detected, are things still open or have they been resolved, as well as things like top 10 reports that you can sort of put your fingers on, keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening in the security environment. The other audience is the responder, and those are the folks that are going to be interacting with findings, seeing what's happening, either taking responsive actions or assigning those to others within the team. We've been careful with Blumira to ensure that this role can be accomplished with a variety of different types of resources. So we have using Blumira as a responder. These may be support people. They may be IT administrators, system administrators, firewall admins, as well as sort of the security roles. We don't assume a lot of security expertise to be able to work the product. Blumira does the heavy lifting to ensure that the findings that are open are prioritized automatically. So there's a work queue here that Blumira dynamically prioritizes. So your training for how to work the prioritization system is work the list from top down. If you're working at top down, then you're doing it right. So I'm going to pick a couple findings to go into that I think are good representations of the kinds of things that we see in the wild quite a bit and are sort of common functionality that we hear our customers using the most. So this first one is a case where we've got a new privileged account is created, right? Domain administrator, basically a new account that that has full privileges. This could be a very normal thing, right? We've got a new person started in a role, or they've been added to a group, or it could be, hey, this account is or something. The domain has been compromised, and somebody is building persistence here. Because we're not sure what the case is, we call this a suspect as opposed to a threat, and to make sure you know what you're looking at. And we sort of alert you, credit card fraud notification style. Here's what happened. New account was created. Is this expected? If it is, then we can dismiss it. Don't need to worry about it. Don't need to talk about it. If it's unexpected and unauthorized, then we just check that box, and that'll automatically escalate the threat to, sorry, let me refresh here and find it in my list here, to a threat. Where is it? There we go. Okay. So now we've got our domain account. Now we're calling it a rogue, right? Because we know that it's unauthorized, and now we're in the sort of example of what do I do about this? And here's where you can see the playbooks. Again, we're gonna keep things simple, make sure that you're clear. This is now a threat. Priority 1, urgent. We're showing just the matched evidence, or the important parts, what user was created by whom. And then the important part here is that over in the workflows, this playbook literally has information that you can paste into PowerShell to take the right corrective action. And what this means is I can actually literally just assign this to support or a system admin if I know the right person. They can take the action. We can leave notes. Take care of this, please. So that we've got a documentation, any documentation of what's going on during the event. And then when we're done, whoever resolves the issue, we're going to close the loop. And what that allows our management to see is that instead of a bunch of things going off into the ether, we actually know what's been worked, what's been completed. And we can go back at any time with an audit trail to say who was involved and all the details of the finding. So that was an example of a playbook where there's actual configuration work that needs to happen. I'm going to show you one where we're going to take an automated action and also a pretty cool detection. So let's look at this one. In this case, we're taking a from a VPN access point, we're detecting password spraying, which is basically somebody trying the same weak password across multiple accounts. It's not going to lock any of those accounts out because they're trying just a couple times and they're doing it low and slow. These things often go undetected, and then boom, all of a sudden you'll have credentials compromised that can be the start of a bigger incident. Credential compromises is like 80% of involved in like 80% of compromises. So this is a big deal. And if we can stop the attack early, we want to do that. Blumira is going to make this super easy since this is and basically as a responder, I can just say, make the call here. Hey, I want to block the attack. Through an integration with next-gen firewalls, we just did that with one click of a button here. You'll notice that I didn't have to type in any IP addresses or even pay too close attention to where the attack was coming from. Blumira picked that up and essentially published that so that our next-gen firewall will know to block any of the IPs that were related in the attack, in this case, just one. If you want to make it even easier and not have to have an administrator confirm the action. I can make a selection here that it's fully automated. In other words, won't ask for any input. It'll just act on the recommendations. And this feature, the dynamic block list that we're leveraging, works with the common next-gen firewalls. In this case, where we see it's configured for ASA, but works with Palo Alto, Fortinet, Checkpoint, things like that. And then it'll time the event out automatically so that we're not keeping stale entries that may get reused by good places. If I ever need to see why this was blocked, I can always go back to the source event right from the block list. And if we want to remove it manually, just a click of the button to undo. And that is automated response. So I think we're getting close to time. I wanted to make sure that people had a chance to answer or ask questions. If you could please post in the Q&A section of the Zoom meeting, and I'm happy to take questions. Okay, let's see. So the first one is, what kinds of data sources do you support? Do you support things like Office 365 and G Suite? Yes, we do. We actually make that really easy in the sensor setup. If you have a new data source that you need to add, you just pick the type of data, and Blumira will walk you through what you need to configure in order to start ingesting that data. Super easy. Question. Okay. Next question. Do you have playbooks for any compliance use cases? Yes, we do. So let's find one here. Oops, sorry, in the wrong place. Bear with me for a sec. No, there's one down here at the bottom. So here's one. You may be required by a compliance requirement to review any new accounts that are created. And you can obviously do this by running a report and signing at the bottom on a regular basis. But we can also create those playbooks and workflows that allow you to workflow this and like we were doing with the other findings, either do it yourself or assign it to other people. Review the information. Hey, we've got a Jon Snow new created, and basically record that this is either okay or flag it as an exception. And now we've got an audit trail that we can go back and look to. Let's do one more question. Is your sensor a hardware device? No, it is a virtual piece of software, runs in Docker. We typically see it deployed in VMs or in places like Azure, AWS, running on basically set up a Linux server, load the Docker, and it's up and running. It's typically located at there's at least one, right, in usually company headquarters close to the data center. If you have a cloud presence, again, in things like Azure or AWS, you may have sensors there. Our sensors run honeypots, so you can use them both for log collection and honeypots, and the system requirements are quite light. Couple gig of RAM, I think, minimum, so nothing too heavyweight. And we are at the half-hour mark. If I don't see any other questions, I will to thank everyone for attending and listening to the talk about Blumira. Please reach out if you have any further questions or interest, and have a great day. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Goodbye.